Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking about strategies for creating trauma-informed schools and classrooms. I'm Yvonne Brannon. I am a former social worker, and currently now I'm an academic researcher. I am joined tonight by Dr. Terrence Ruth, who is a former principal and teacher, and he is currently in the social work department at NC State. He is also president of the Justice Love Foundation. Another role I get to play is chair of the Public Schools First NC, who is your host tonight, who is sponsoring our workshop on strategies for creating trauma-informed classrooms. So, Terrence, I'm glad you're here tonight, and I welcome all of our folks here with us. And I'm going to go ahead and jump in since we were a few minutes late starting. So one of the things I want to share with you really quickly, in case you did not see the film Resilience, our conversation tonight is based around the film Resilience, which is about adverse childhood experiences, toxic stress, resilience, and being trauma-informed practices. So if you've seen this movie, then you're in that's great. It's going to be really helpful to you as we go through the presentation. It is not required. And if you haven't seen the film, see it soon. We'll tell you about that coming up. So one of the things that we will share with you, just a quick overview very quickly, in case you haven't seen the film, is that it is around a study that was done some years ago on adverse childhood experiences. It looked at a study of thousands and thousands of children under the 18 and tried to measure those incidences, those events in their lives that they are counting as adverse childhood experiences. And some of these ACEs include, and I'll let you look over those yourself, I'm not going to read them all, but emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, of course, neglect, of course, violence in the home, violence towards your mother or father in the home, addiction in the family, but all the way also to things such as bullying and racism. And of course, now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that is really having a huge impact on our children. And we'll talk about that later in the program tonight. But these significant traumatic experiences, ACEs, often result in what's called toxic stress, and that's what's really the tremendous emphasis and interest to us.
So what is, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Terrence.
So what is toxic stress? And that's really the core of the video when you watch it. And if you watched it, you've heard it several times. But it's a dangerous biological syndrome caused by abuse and neglect during childhood that cause unhealthy stress levels. What's important here is that toxic stress interferes with a child's variability to learn. And what's important to know in the season we're in right now is that COVID has had a significant impact on children and their families. And limited studies report so far, but the long-term impacts are definitely likely.
And one of the things that, you know, the film does promote, and we believe in, and we're promoting, is that, yes, trauma-informed practices are critical, but, you know, because they help you deal with children who are experiencing trauma, but they also help you teach children resilience. And resilience is that very ability to thrive, to adapt, to cope, despite tough circumstances. So it's really important. That's the film's name, Resilience. But resilience is the natural counterweight to ACEs, right? So the more we're able to help children learn how to be resilient, the more likely they are able to deal with negative situations in a positive way. They don't have to always have unfavorable consequences. So resilience, as we all know, is not something you're born with. Resilience is really a skill that can be taught, it can be learned, it can be practiced. And we really believe that there is a role for our school administrators and our school classroom teachers to be involved in helping kids learn how to be resilient. Everybody has the ability to become resilient if they're surrounded by the right environments or the right people. And many times where we can't control the environment, where we can't always ensure how parents are going to be able to deal with their own lives and their children's, we can look for other caring adults, and that's the role that teachers and administrators play. So schools can create a trauma-informed climate. They can help kids be academically successful, and they can help these students either by getting them into support services and looking for ways to help them deal with ACEs, and hopefully all of us at the end of all of this hope that we can prevent them. So we're going to move right ahead, and hold on, I went the wrong way. I do want to share with you just a few notes about COVID and its impact on all the things we're talking about now. 17% of kindergarten students have not enrolled this year. Okay, it's the biggest drop in kindergarten enrollment we've ever seen, and it's primarily in neighborhoods with the lowest household incomes. So we know that the consequence of that learning loss and those interpersonal skills is going to be tremendous when our kids come back in-person instruction, part-time, or maybe next year full-time. We also saw alarming data that's come out and that K through 12 schools have seen a 66% jump in overall student safety indicators. What are those? Things like suicide and self-harm, an 83% increase. Violence towards others, 63%. Sexual content issues, 135%. And drugs and alcohol, 59%. So this is, we were already expecting some very serious things with our teens. Last year, the data before COVID came out showing that for 10 to 17-year-olds, the second leading cause of death was suicide. And so we see that COVID has done nothing but make all these indicators worse. And so we know that elementary school kids are increasingly contributing to some of those statistics I just read to you. So they're going to need a lot of time and attention, a lot of social emotional learning that we've tend to kind of push towards the middle and high school levels. We're going to have to be looking at this long term more in terms of our elementary kids as well. So one of the things that social emotional learning experts, people who really do this work, are raising concerns about the increasing levels of trauma and stress and anxiety and depression. Okay, so one of the things that we want to urge all of us to do, and think about it tonight as we go through our workshop together, how we can pay more attention to young people's social and emotional well-being, how we can help them get help. We've seen a rise in a lot of incidents of violence in our community, and it's almost always tied back to mental health issues and the lack of some people being able to be connected to the help they needed. So even in remote learning, we've got to invest in relationship building with our students and our families using trauma-informed practices.
For the national view, most children with any one ACE had at least one other, ranging from 54.4% to 95.4% across the 9 ACEs assessed. Now, nearly 1/3 of U.S. youth aged 12 to 17 have experienced 2 or more types of childhood adversity that are likely to affect their physical and mental health as adults. Nearly 35 million U.S. children have experienced one or more types of childhood trauma. And what we know, both in the classroom and out the classroom, is that ACEs are costly. Economic and social cost to families, communities, and society totals hundreds of billions of dollars each year. And we see the outcomes in our schools, our communities, especially in our classrooms. Now, how about North Carolina? We're going to zoom into our state. 1 in 5 North Carolina children experience food insecurity, and roughly 25% live in poverty. And this is pre-COVID, and we know that COVID has really exacerbated these disparities. Significant geographical disparities of wealth in North Carolina. Child poverty rates range from a low of 13% to a high of 45%. 1 in 4 children experience more than one ACE. Trauma from ACEs negatively impact brain development, learning, and memory, social skills, and the mental and physical health of children. What's significant here is that not only is the trauma impacting the physical outward, but it's also actually impacting the body, the health of the actual human body, the child's body. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network defines trauma as the physical and emotional responses of a child to events that threaten the life or physical or emotional wellness of the child, or of someone critically important to the child, such as a parent or a sibling. That's important to emphasize. Even someone that's important to the child. Children respond to trauma differently, and this research is clear. Childhood trauma experiences, traumatic childhood experiences not addressed can seriously impact and create long-term effects on children's well-being. And we know that a family of 2 or more, 3 or 6, one child's response will be different than another, and even in the same family.
So what we want to do now is, now that we've done this quick overview, we want to get to talking about the meat of our program tonight, was talking about the role of administrators, principals, leaders in the school, and the staff. And Dr. Ruth, I'll let you start off.
Sounds good. And again, trauma-informed steps really can involve both the administrator and the teacher. And so for administrators and for schools in total, more than 2/3 of children will experience a potentially traumatic event by the age of 16. ACEs can impact a child's cognitive abilities and have a negative impact on their effect on their academic performance. Trauma-informed schools have become essential to successfully addressing the broadening spectrum of ACEs. Fostering trauma-informed schools starts with a thoughtful review of school policies, practices, staff development activities, and school culture issues are grounded in trauma sensitivity. School leaders play a critical role in articulating a commitment to adopting a trauma-informed and bringing about the change needed to ensure that all students, especially those affected by trauma, are able to experience social, emotional, academic success, and academic success in school. Adapting new policies and procedures will be critical in your success in becoming a trauma-informed school. All school personnel need to understand trauma and its effect on students. And for teachers in particular, forming positive relationships with your students, promoting trauma-sensitive approaches in your classroom will help struggling students while allowing all students to build resilience and confidence. With the right support, all students can successfully navigate adverse events and thrive in schools.
And so tonight we're going to use this model, these 6 concepts, as a way to talk about building relationships with schools, for administrators with their staff, and for teachers, classroom educators, with your students. So we're going to use listen, the ability to understand what is being communicated verbally and non-verbally, reassuring, the ability to transfer value to the perspectives of vulnerable children, students, validation, the ability to acknowledge what is being communicated by the students, respond, the ability to communicate an explanation and not a defending statement, repair, the ability to repair relationships and establish trust between staff and students, and improve peer-to-peer communication. And the last is resolve, the ability to come to terms with what is happening excuse me, and collaborate to prevent future misunderstandings. Students experience a trauma and have a huge issue with trust. Past letdowns in their lives, especially in terms of communications, make their ability to trust extremely difficult. Recognizing these kind of signs can really help these children, and it starts with listening. So let's talk about that first concept, listening.
And so as administrators, listening, again, is a key step in building relationships with students experiencing trauma. So with the administrative hat, you want to find out your staff's knowledge about trauma-informed strategies and their concerns. Provide training needed to support staff in this work. Develop a feedback loop to keep all staff informed and to encourage ongoing dialogue and exchange of ideas. And when me and Yvonne would visit different school districts and schools, we realized that there's some teachers and staff members that are still wrestling with their own trauma. And so it was helpful to have this training so that they could understand and see signs in their students.
And as a classroom teacher, listening is incredibly important. Relationships with your students start with listening. This is the first critical step in building this trust and transparency with students and their caregivers. It's really important, and I'm sure everyone agrees, that getting to know your students, taking some time to know something personal, some way that you can connect with each student is critically important in this, the first step in building relationships with students, building trust with them, and helping them on their path to success. So let's talk a little bit about the next concept, reassure. What's the principal's role in this?
Really, as a principal, you want to create a school culture that allows students to be listened to, even if the student's narrative may contradict the staff narrative. Reassuring your students and making them feel their perspective matters. It's profoundly healing and comforting. Provide a safe place and way for students to talk and share. Be culturally aware as well. Building trust in the fairness and integrity of decisions made about student discipline is essential.
And so in this concept of reassuring, some people may not think of it this way, but walking into the school building, how the school building looks, what's on the bulletin board, how someone treats you when you walk into the office, how someone stops and listens to what a student's saying in the hallway. We have been in a lot of schools and we've seen some really wonderful examples of cultural sensitivity and beautiful bulletin boards. We've seen signs out front that says, oops, you're late. Just go straight to your class and check in later. That's a really different concept than all tardy students must report immediately to the principal's office, which we've also seen outside of schools. So that very first time of reassuring your students and having those signals that you care about them is really important, and listening. And for classroom teachers, it often means that you have to give students an opportunity to talk in the class and participate in the class without expectations and without comment. Having that reliable warmth and love that comes from only a teacher can give can make a student feel really safe. And being consistent, being clear, having the norms set for the classroom and keeping them for everybody is another example.
Now, validate, again, one of the critical steps in making sure that you build a relationship with students experiencing trauma. And as an administrator or principal, you want to promote student perspectives, provide professional development that equips teachers with strategies for validating students. Some teachers may yearn for that skill set, and demonstrating that a student's worth is not contingent on good behavior or grades. Let students know that you care about them, the person. So look for ways to include student voices in policies that govern students. And when students feel safe, they take more risk. And this is how resilience is learned.
I don't think there's very much to add to what Dr. Ruth has said here, but one of the things that um, we think is critically important, especially in the lower grades, is that there is an opportunity for every child to have a moment or two, a couple minutes during the week to have interaction with the teacher one-on-one, because this is how often students get their validation, is whenever they can talk to a teacher one-on-one, not when it's about where's your homework, not when it's about, you know, what happened on your test, but when it's about how are you doing, what's going on with you this week, what are some of the things that you're doing, what is your favorite color, what is your favorite story, movie, whatever it is. And building those personal relationships is how you validate their sense of trust and worth. And it's incredibly important that it's not just always around academic success or failure. And that's probably the key concept here. Now, in terms of the administrators and the staff, it works the same way, right? What do we like as adults? We like to be validated. We like to know that someone cares about us and considers our work important. They like us as people and that they are going to treat us fairly. So kids are very much the same.
And for respond, again, another critical step to building relationships with students experiencing trauma. In your response, remember that students are observing. So learning environments that are safe and supportive enable trauma-informed strategies. Like resilience building should be modeled and taught by all staff. Yvonne mentioned earlier, the person at the front desk, to the bus driver, to the janitor, all staff. Adapt and adopt a restorative practice. Restorative justice helps traumatized students de-escalate. It helps students understand their actions, teaches them healthy communication skills, helps them resolve conflicts in an appropriate manner, and allows students to take responsibility for their action. And imagine if an entire school environment and culture really supports and empowers staff to uplift restorative practices. And we think response is key in terms of sustaining healthy relationships.
One way that teachers can really help model this and can help their students get along well in class is to create a list of non-defensive statements that might even be a screen cover or on the presentation or the PowerPoint, or when class opens virtually, or in the classroom on the wall once we go into in-person learning. Encourage students to address each other in a positive way, in a non-confrontational way, a non-defense way. One of those important opportunities that teachers have is to help their students learn better peer-to-peer relationships and to help them reduce negative interactions. One of the ways that kids don't like to participate in school is if they're afraid of being criticized, afraid of being ostracized or made fun of or mocked. It goes on the other side. Often students who are saying, using a way of presenting themselves in a negative way, often don't know how to frame things with, in my opinion, or in my view, or another way of looking at this. So that in helping our kids figure out how to get along with each other, and even as we respond directly to our students to say the same thing. That's interesting view, Bobby. However, in our lesson today, what the author is trying to say is this, but thank you for that view, very interesting. So always looking for a way that our responses are non-critical and do not create a defensive reaction from our students. I think it's so important to emphasize over and over again that, you know, how we interact with each other can produce, you know, very appropriate and desirable outcomes or the opposite. So we have to be very careful how we respond to each other and how we allow students to respond to each other in our class. I went too fast there, hold on.
And respond.
Oh, I did that one. I'm sorry, y'all. Please forgive me. I've got,
We should be.
I got these out of order, Terrence, so you're gonna have to do this one and we'll go back if you don't mind. Everybody forgive me.
No problem. No problem. So resolve. As administrator, I found that the best moments to have shared learning was staff meetings. And so creating a trauma-informed environment really started in the staff meetings. And so for resolve, I would encourage administrators to hold frequent staff meetings devoted to reviewing best practices for resolving conflict and communication. Support staff development that includes social emotional learning tools like meditation, breathing exercise, simple yoga poses, which are popular right now, and self-awareness techniques to help students avert their negative emotions and behaviors, for example.
And this also applies to our students. Let's make sure that our students have some kind of a timeout process as well. We've learned that a lot of times that if kids have a moment, if they're allowed a personal pause, if they're allowed to talk or express their concerns, or if they just need silence on occasion, that this could be a very powerful tool. We've talked to teachers who've talked about how they'll let everybody can come up to their desk and get a green pass card. And this card allows them 5 minutes in the back of the room, sitting at a table, reading a book, putting their head down, whatever it is, because sometimes students also need a timeout, need a break. You know, as adults, we can say that to each other. Hey, I just need a break. Just give me a few minutes. Would you just let me think about that? Sometimes with students, we don't use those same concepts, especially for traumatized kids who may be reacting to something else that happened at home, or something on the bus, or something on the way to school, something in the hallway. Often they need a time to take a break. And this is a good time to also let them know again that you trust them, that you care about them. And they can also do the same things. I have had teachers tell me they start every class with deep breathing. They start every class with a moment of silence, with a meditation, and that they end every class the same way. And that they help kids learn that centering, getting into the class, thinking about where you are is very important. Some of the same techniques that often as adults we expect from others as a way of respect. So those are techniques also work very well in our classrooms.
In repair, the final step that we will cover today, it really recognize teachers who demonstrate the most impactful classroom environment and encourage them to share. And so students are often the best testimonials for what teachers are giving the best practice in terms of repairing relationships. The students will tell you. Students will voice those teachers that create the best classroom environment. So you want to share successes with all staff, not just a few. Engage in routine visits to classroom to observe how trauma-informed strategies are being implemented. Provide a non-judgmental feedback on what is working or needs to be adjusted or modified. Many teachers are open to repairing and figuring out how to be more trauma-informed. And as an administrator, consider a work group to help solve challenges or barriers and guide your trauma-informed work both in the classroom and in the larger school building.
So those are really great suggestions. And so what about the classroom for teachers? Well, some of these same concepts work there too, right? But we really need to look for ways to help students restore a sense of fairness in their classrooms. Many schools have restorative justice programs, and even if the school itself doesn't have a restorative justice program, you can implement something like that in your own classroom. Have a way to allow restorative practices. Never have, if you zero tolerance. This must happen. This is the consequence. There is no discussion. There is no room for discussion. Is a really hard place to put yourself between yourself and building a trusting relationship with a student. Instead, if you can figure out a way for restorative practices where students can, just like they can make up missed homework sometimes, can figure out a way to help them rebuild a relationship in their class, especially if you see two students who are not getting along. There's perhaps a way that you can help them to figure out how to have healthy communications. And I think that's better than sending them to the principal's office. But restorative justice, that concept of figuring out how kids can make up for their wrongs, apologizing, or sharing a conversation with each other, or two students going and working with the counselor. This process helps them understand how healthy relationships should be held. Maybe they're in their situation that they've grown up in, they haven't seen a healthy communication or healthy strategy for solving problems. And so this gives us another opportunity to help traumatize students and help them understand that there's no punishment, but there is a need for justice. We do have to make up for our bad behavior sometimes by, saying I'm sorry, or looking for a way to reestablish our relationship with our kids. But it's, there's a way to have kids take responsibility for their behavior without embarrassing them, punishing them, or making them feel shut out of the classroom. That worst thing that parents hate to hear, and classroom teachers are there too, is that's not fair. That's not fair, and that doesn't seem honest. And that, so having fair and honest conversations and fair and honest treatment of all kids is really important. So a couple of quick tips that we want to share with you tonight from all the visits that we've had back and forth with many of our teachers, is that we first want to emphasize tonight that we do understand that this infection, this COVID, it has been incredibly powerfully damaging to the educational system and to our community right now, but it seems like we're turning the corner, and we understand that toxic stress is also critical. And even during these times of social distancing and wearing masks or doing remote, connecting to our students is still a critical part. It's the most important part to supporting a child's healthy growth, socially, emotionally, academically. Everything, the key to a child's success very often is the relationship they have with that classroom teacher, whether it's remote or in person. So one of the things that a lot of child development specialists encourage people to do is practice what they call serve and return, back and forth interaction with your students. And you can think of that very much similar to tennis, right? Where somebody serves and somebody returns the ball. So sometimes you have to pay attention to look for that opportunity to see a child looking at you, and give them a smile, or watch a look on their face to notice that they're confused or they don't understand, and taking time to stop and acknowledge that. Terrence, do you have a question, Terrence? Not, you look confused, Terrence, but Terrence, do you have a question? Or Terrence, what do you think about that? Some way to bring someone back into the conversation. But this serve and return of this, of a paying attention to a student, and then looking for a way to give them encouragement, to give them a smile, to build trust. This is really incredibly important way to show them that you're listening, that you're paying attention, and that you respond. Another really incredibly interesting research study that was recently done is talking about how important it is to have individual conferences with all your students, to try to find 5-7 minutes a week, at least once a week, but maybe if you can't do 2, at least once a week, where it's just one-on-one conference with that student. Now, one of the good things I've seen with remote learning, teachers are telling me that they're using a lot of breakout rooms where they are having one-on-one conversations with the kid about if they don't understand something that's going on with the math problem, for example, or they're having trouble with their homework, or they're having trouble with their internet, just some way to talk. So I think it's really important to make sure. We've talked to teachers across the state that do have a variety of techniques they use for this, but always make sure that they find a few minutes every week to talk one-on-one with students. So not only does that help you identify problems, not just academic problems, but problems they may be having socially or problems they may be having at home. Things they're not going to say out loud in a classroom, but things they may say to you, explain to you one-on-one. And these one-on-one times build this relationship. It's a great opportunity, even if you're having this conference around their math test wasn't so great. It can still be a time to figure out what they don't understand, show them praise, give them encouragement, and think of something you can say to encourage them to try harder next time. And let's try a new technique. The other thing is make sure you're developing relationships with parents. Now, it's hard for some parents, and but you should always try to do the same thing. Acknowledge parents whenever you can. Allow students to connect with their classmates. Try to allow time, if you can't every day, then at least once a week, where students can interact freely and talk and build some relationships, share some information. And same thing, I have a teacher right now that she's sponsoring a once a month parent meeting, and parents are getting on Zoom, and there's no real agenda other than saying the teacher doing a quick update and explain, what's going on in the class and what they're doing next month. And it gives the parents a chance to see each other. Hi, Terrence. So you're Bobby's daddy, right? And it's giving them an opportunity to build relationships as parents. And then always for teachers, I would always want to say, take a break yourself, right? Be also kind to yourself. Adults need a way to be calm and deal with their stress as much as anyone else. So that never hurts to do that deep breathing and meditation yourself. One of the things I'd like to share just really quickly is that listening is really a wonderful thing to do. And a lot of teachers tell us that they're, talking to students is a little hard for them. They're great teaching. They know their curriculum. They love instructing, but communication is a hard thing for them. So I always like to remind them that kids are just like us. Now they're shorter and they're probably a heck of a lot cuter than us, Terrence, but don't underestimate or overestimate kids. Sometimes they can talk about very big issues, and sometimes they understand those. And so it's important not to feel like you can't talk to a kid. Talk with them the same way you would your colleagues, respectfully, politely, with genuine interest, and try to view the situation in their world. This is something that's really important for traumatized children, to try to remember from where they're coming from, what they have been through, what they're facing. Many of you have taught homeless kids for a long time. You already have a good feel for this. Many of you have children who come to school hungry. Many of you have had children who are in custody disputes or they're in foster care. And so you understand the trauma that's going on with kids and their families, but it's really important to always try to view from their situation in the world, view them, and then take them serious. Never condescend. The fastest way to destroy your relationship with your students is to say anything that's condescending, especially if it's mocking. It may be what you think is of teasing, but Kids have such thin skin when it comes to what their teachers say about them. Survey after survey have shown how critically important students value their teacher's opinion of them. That nothing means more, and especially our younger children in K through 5 and sometimes in middle school. What the teacher says or doesn't say is critical to their mental health issues for the day. Listen for the subtext to see or hear concerns that are going on. And be sure to help them connect to the counselors or the social worker when needed. Give them compliments as often as you can that are meaningful, specific, and true. This falls under that heading that our mothers told us or our grandmothers told us, you can always find something nice to say. And even if the compliment is only true right now, it only has to be true for the day. You're doing a great job today, Terrence. And share of yourself. Students really love to know about their teachers. Maybe think of something that, time when you were in a dance recital and you forgot the steps. Think of a funny story from your own childhood. Tell them about a time when you had, that teacher, Mrs. Horrible Hurley. Think about things that would make them laugh, but also make them see that you're human, and build a relationship with them, and then get on their level literally. One of the things that high school students have reported in several of their surveys is how they don't like teachers who hang over their desk. It makes them feel intimidated and childish. So have some of those older kids come back and sit at the conference table or sit at near your desk and chat with you face to face, person to person, instead of lording over them. And then one more slide I want to share with you, because another interesting study that was just completed was about how to get your kids or students to turn their cameras on and off. And it occurred to me and Terrence that this was a wonderful example of how you can accomplish that and do it in a way that you actually build trust with your students. The survey said that 45% of the kids were worried about their appearances, how they looked, and that 17% of them felt extremely self-conscious. And think about that. It doesn't surprise you, right? So we have, overwhelmingly the majority of these kids were not turning their cameras off because of being rude to the teacher, but we're doing it because of being concerned about their appearances and how they look. Only 17% said they worried about their surroundings. So, if you really think about what's going on there with students, and then we need to find a way to help them with these barriers. And so one of the techniques this survey did was the teachers were surveying their kids one-on-one about, what would be a barrier to them turning their cameras on. One of the things they found out was that the kids kind of thought it was the norm. All the other kids turned theirs off, so they turned theirs off, and so they, kind of round, monkey see, monkey do, and they felt like that was kind of the norm. So they encourage us to make it a norm that, no, we really want people to turn their cameras on, but we got to build an area of trust. Right, so that means you have to find out what it is that would make them comfortable. Teach them how to use virtual backgrounds. Don't just tell them about it, show them how to do it, or even create one for your class that they can pull down out of your Google Docs, right? Because maybe they don't have the capacity to take a photo and upload a photo. Use waiting rooms. In this virtual world we're in, here's some great opportunities. This survey said that was looking at some of the techniques that teachers were using, and kids were so excited when they got let into the class, and it'd be, hey Terrence, how are you? Good to see you today. Click. Hey Yvonne, good to see you. Are you doing okay? You need to talk later? Okay, we'll have some breakout time. Click. Just letting them into the class is no different than greeting them at the doorway to your classroom in the hall. And then having breakout rooms, encouraging teachers as a way to build trust with their students is having private breakout rooms where they could problem solve and talk with them one-on-one to see how they were doing. And then even in this virtual world now, right, if they're not comfortable doing a live presentation, let them pre-record it and show it that way, just like we all show videos in our classrooms now.
In summary, just going to briefly just skim through. We covered some amazing material, but we just want to remind you that toxic stress is a dangerous biological syndrome caused by abuse, neglect during childhood, trigger hormones that create havoc on the brains and bodies of our children. That point is significant. And what we want to also understand is that that toxic stress, that same stress we define, will and can and does impact a child's ability to learn. And what we want to take away from our conversation today is that resilience is a natural counterweight to adverse childhood experiences. The more resilient a child is, the more likely they are to deal with negative situations in a healthy way that won't prolong unfavorable outcomes. And it's important to also understand that resilience is not an innate characteristic, but it can be learned, it can be taught. And so we must, as learning and educating professionals, embrace that aspect of resiliency and make it a part of our school and our classroom. And the final thing is schools can create a trauma-informed climate to help students be academically successful, as well as guide students to support services they need to cope with or prevent future ACEs.
And then, you know, as we're closing tonight, you know, we want to take time to acknowledge that COVID has done a lot of things that have impacted our families. We're not going to go over all of those, but with kids not able to participate in their places of worship and their schools the same way, a lot of the support systems that our families and our students have needed have been pulled out from underneath their very feet. And so this has really been a tough time. So we know that we must support a lot of these families who are in crisis now and who may have long-term consequences well into the remainder of this year and into next year academically and socially. So we've got to do everything we can. So thank you to all of you who have been working to help get meals to students and their families. Thank you to all of you who've been working in food banks. Thanks to all of you who've been trying to look for ways to engage your students. We appreciate you. We know you're there. And we know that we have to do everything we can to ensure the well-being of our children and our family. So even after now, even when we are able to return to schools, one of the key things that we must do is care deeply about fighting poverty. A lot of our families who are in traumatized situations are due to the lack of income in the home, the lack of secure funding for housing, for food, for health care, lack of access to mental health services. So we know that these things are really very important. Whenever you watch the film with us, if you have, you know that we always say in closing that we can work together to build resilience for our kids. Being trauma informed, understanding the impacts of trauma and what it does to our children and what it does to many adults is critical in how we interact and help children be successful. On the ACEs score, it's a score of 1 to 10. And as many of you have seen, I am a 7 and Terrence is an 8. And we freely talk about that in terms of how we grew up with high ACEs scores and through the help of a few caring adults that really impacted and changed our entire lives. For some people, it can be parents. For others, it can be an adult coach. It can be the principal, it can be the classroom teacher, it can be the counselor, it can be somebody at the church. But we do know that caring adults can impact the buffers of toxic stress. So when we use these strategies of sensitivity and in trauma-informed practices in our classrooms and in our schools, we know that it helps all students, especially those who are impacted by traumatic issues. So we know that you're very important. We always like to say, be the one caring adult. It's my favorite hashtag, because we truly believe that, you know, you could be the one person that could make the difference in the success of a student. For me, I'd like to tell one story that when I was in high school, I had a teacher stop me in the hallway and say, you need to go to college. And at that time, I had no concept of what that meant. I knew that my teachers had been to college. I had no idea how you went to college. This very teacher helped me register for the SAT. She actually paid my fee. And I did get into college, and I did get some scholarships, and I did graduate, and the rest is history. But that one teacher saved my life in high school. She saw value in me. She saw worth in me. She took time to spend helping me become things that I could be. So now, at the end of this tonight, if you missed the film, or if you love the film and you want all your friends to watch it too, we're going to be showing it 3 more times. And these are pre-scheduled right now, March 6th, 9th, and 8th. You can go to our Facebook page, and the registration link is there. We really encourage you to encourage your friends at church, your friends at work, other teachers, other counselors, other parents to watch this film and join some of our future conversations. We're going to have a workshop later in the year for parents and PTAs on how to be trauma informed and how to build resiliency. We also want to encourage you, if you would like to schedule your own event. If you work at a school and you'd like everybody at your school to watch this film, if you work in at a church and you want all your church members, look, we're in virtual world. This is excellent opportunity for us to show this film to you, to your PTA, to your church organization, to your friends. So if you will email us, info@publicschools.org, we can schedule your own personal screening for the film Resilience outside of these 3 scheduled times. So the last thing that I am required to invite you all to do is to connect with us. We have, you know, a Facebook page. We really need you there. It's a great way of knowing what's coming up. You can email us. We have some excellent videos. We encourage you to go to our YouTube channel and subscribe and see some of the outstanding videos we already have there. And of course, you can follow us on Twitter. So with that, I'm going to stop for just a second. And Terrence, I want to give everybody in our audience, if there's anyone there that has a question or a comment to share, I want to make sure we take just a few minutes to do that before we sign off here. Is there anyone that has a question or a comment? Please let me know.
And I don't see any questions in the Q&A box at the moment.
Okay. I'm just going to double check here. So if you have a question later or if something comes to your mind and you'd like to ask either one of us a question, there's our email address right here, info@publicschoolsfirstnc.org. You can email us and we'll get back to you with the answer as soon as we can. One thing I would tell you is that you don't want to overlook is our website. It's in the bottom here, www.publicschoolsfirstnc. We have some tremendous resources on resilience there. Lots of great articles, many great videos, books. If you will go to our website and look under issues and you'll see resilience. When you click on there, we have lots of stuff on resilience in general, some things about COVID, resilience resources, and lots of information on how you can learn more about being trauma informed yourself. So please don't overlook our resources. We'd love to share them with you. We are child and public education advocates. We work very hard to create these materials, and they're yours. So go to our website, copy it, print it, take it, use it however you can. We're not trying to have credit for our work. We want to let our work inspire and be used by others. So, okay, so if there's no questions tonight, we'll see you soon. Good night, Terrence. Good night to all our friends here tonight, and we will see you soon.